and welcome to MGoRadio 10.7. I'm Seth Fisher here with Alex Strain. We don't have Brian Cook with us. We find him, we'll let you know. This is MGoRadio 10.7. As I said, we'd like to thank Underground Printing. Rishi and Ryan have supported us since the First Child's First Sports tier. Gear up at UGPMichiganApparel.com or check our selection at MGoBlogstore.com, which has a shirt that says, "That's okay, I have football," then cross that out, then basketball, and cross that out, then football, etc., etc. Check that one out. We'd also like to thank our associate sponsors, Peak Wealth Management, Realtor and Lender Matt Demarest, Human Element, Ann Arbor Elder Law, Royal Oath Insurance Group, Michigan Law Grad, Venue by 4M, Wine World Organics, Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning, Champion Circle, the Autograph Fan and Rewarded app, Signal Wire, where we're recording this, and introducing Community Pest Solutions. Alex, I think Brian didn't want to talk about Michigan State.
Yeah, well, it's still a game, still happening, and still could be quite important for the season, certainly for Michigan State. Always a big game for them. They're always bringing their best stuff, and I imagine that'll be the case, especially for Jonathan Smith, right? He wins this game. He's got job security for at least 3 years to start
Right.
out, no matter what happens elsewhere.
Right, he can turn around and order. I mean, imagine not going to do the same mistake they did last time, right? Like, oh, the guy beat Michigan. Let's pay him a whole bunch of money.
Yeah, but yeah, you never know. So,
is this for bowl eligibility?
They're 4-3, but they have Purdue as one of their remaining games. So essentially, they also have Rutgers. So I think they have a path even if they were to lose this game. But if they win it,
Alex, I meant for us.
Oh, yeah, pretty much with Northwestern as well. So
yeah, well, obviously the Michigan State goes as Aaron Childs goes, and Aiden Childs goes in every direction.
He does. It's been a really up and down kind of roller coaster. But the thing that really stands out, I think, at the moment is just the manner in which they let him run the offense. And it's pretty unusual. I've charted a lot of quarterbacks over the years that are pretty up and down, pretty uncertain, young in their career. And generally you see them kind of wear handcuffs, right? They aren't allowed to do certain things because the coach is focused on limiting the turnovers, limiting the mistakes, just throw shorter stuff. That's not how MSU does it. MSU is letting him do what he wants. And that leads to the shockingly high number of turnovers, but also some really dangerous plays in the positive sense in terms of pushing the ball down the field. He's over 8 yards an attempt, which is quite a bit, especially for a young quarterback. He has a good deep ball, and he takes those chances, and they're willing to live with the bad. And to this point, with a 4-3 record and a chance to go to a bowl game in a rebuilding season, I don't necessarily think that's the wrong decision to this point in time, but it definitely has cost them in some games. Boston College won most notably with the 3 interceptions. Everything is happening when he's back there.
Yeah, and I think that puts into context some of the numbers that they have. Like, SP Plus has them 101st, right? They're not they're not the 101st offense in the country. It's when you have a turnover in the red zone, it's like a huge EPA, right? And that goes into those advanced stats. And it looks like a -5 points just that one play. But this is something Jonathan Smith did at Oregon State too, and I think it's not like he just puts him back there and has him do whatever he wants. I think he goes max pro, and he's going to protect him a bit. He doesn't want to blow up his young quarterback. He wants him to sit back there and have time to get a feel for what's happening out there and then try to make a play. And he's got some playmakers. He's got Nick Marsh has really kind of come along this year. I know it's a name that people in the state of Michigan are like, how did he not go to Michigan? But, that he's been a Spartan through and through, and I mean, he's going to be a pretty good one for the next few years.
Yeah, we can get to Marsh in a second. Another note on Giles is his interceptions, I think, are a combination of factors. It's partially reading the field, and he's not quite as advanced as he should be in that yet. Second-year player, that sort of thing. The accuracy also wavers a decent bit. He has a tendency to throw behind receivers, throw over receivers. And it's just that combination. And against Iowa in the game I charted, you kind of see that example where He throws two really bad passes. One of them gets intercepted. The other one is dropped by the safety. But the first one, the receiver's open, and he just badly misses him. A really inaccurate pass straight to the safety. The other one, he's on a rollout. You got the tight end, Jack Velling, who's open, and Childs looks at him, looks at him, looks at him, looks at him. Then by the time he pulls the trigger, the window is closing. There's still potentially a lane there to throw it. But again, he throws it behind, and it's right into the chest of the safety, who drops it. And that's just kind of the story, is that he's a gunslinger. He's allowed to take chances, but he's just not quite accurate enough, and he's not good enough on his reads to avoid throwing 2 to 3 pretty interceptable balls per week. He's number one in the country in turnover-worthy passes to PFF with 19, and I think they played 7 games. So you're looking at about 2.5 per game. And it's hard to believe there won't be at least one, and it's just on Michigan to catch it, because and it could, that's a huge storyline, is just the opportunity to take those and give good field position for the Michigan offense, potentially get defensive touchdowns. Like, that's the big storyline in this game.
Yeah, Michigan's drops, two interceptions for every one that they pick off, which is kind of, I feel like that's going to be really annoying in this game, because Makari Page is I think he's had 5 or 6 interceptions in opportunities this year, and he's brought in one of them. Quinton Johnson as well. How would you approach these guys? I know Michigan's been kind of varied in there. Do you zone them and try to mess with Child's eyes? Do you?
I think that's the best bet. Yeah, I mean, you can play man overall, just because their depth of receiver isn't that great, but Marsh is a concern. Marsh has had a great season. We are generally people that aren't the biggest on true freshman receivers. We generally temper expectations, but I don't know. That old heuristic might be eroding a little bit.
Well, it depends what you're doing with that receiver, right? If you're having him run a lot of routes, the routes are hard to learn. Blocking is hard to learn. And having a guy out there look at Michigan's receivers. You have receivers who don't know what they're doing out there, and sometimes you can very much see it. A guy like Nick Marsh, he's been going through Sound Mind, Sound Body, which is still one of the best in the country as far as developing players. He's, the receiver version of Will Johnson. He's been around that same exact program for years and years. They've been talking about that kid since he was in middle school, right? So he has a leg up on a lot of the kids in his grade. And he's also, I don't know if he's running the most, intricate routes. I don't know if he's got a couple double moves and whatnot, but I don't really see him running a lot of digs. I don't really see him. He runs goes, and he runs posts, and he runs flags. And when you have that kind of talent, those are all very dangerous things, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, his go routes, the vertical stuff, that's the biggest area of concern, I think, for Michigan coming into this game, just because we've seen some, up and down play from safeties at times. We're not sure the status of Will Johnson, and if it is Jair Hill, it has to be on Marsh. That's going to be heck of a battle between two really talented young players. But Marsh, his vertical ability really won them that Maryland game. I think he had a 77-yard touchdown right at the end there, and another 30-40-yard pass in that fourth quarter. So Michigan's got to be ready for him. But outside of Marsh, the other targets, not that dangerous overall. Jack Velling came in as an all Pac-12 tight end from Oregon State. I think he's been a little disappointing, more of a check down guy. Montori Foster and Jaron Glover, we've had the just guys territory, and they don't have much depth beyond the starters. So really, the emergence of Marsh has been a godsend, because coming into the year, it just really looked pretty rough for the Michigan State receiving corps. But he's been able to give them at least one weapon that can be pretty dangerous.
And then you did not like the right side of their offensive line.
I mean, the OL is what it is, and we knew that coming into the year. It's patchwork of some guys left over from the Tucker era who are still pretty young, as well as some transfers. The transfers have done better than the holdovers. I mean, Tanner Miller, their center, and the left guard, Newman from Holy Cross, have been okay. But left tackle, right guard look like pretty big weak spots, where you have Stanton Rammel at left tackles, redshirt freshman, Lipo at right tackle. And we should note their right guard is a backup. Christian Phillips was supposed to be the starter. He went out for the year in early September. So it's really a question of, can you give him time? Because pressure rates on Childs have been pretty bad. Like when he gets pressured, his passer rating, turnover worthy passes, all that stuff is what shows up the most. And that's kind of the game plan, is going to be try to get pressure, speed him up, and force those turnover worthy passes. And when he throws them, please catch them.
Right. All right. Brian, we haven't done the Michigan State running game yet, but did you have Aiden Childs takes?
He's either Jeff Sims 2.0 or he's going to get a lot better and he's going to be a really good quarterback. And I don't think you can tell which direction it's going to go this early in his career. I mean, first year as a starter, and he's been very erratic, but he had a real good game last week. So,
yeah, and speaking of the Jeff Sims thing, we should note Child's mobility, which we haven't talked a lot about, but that's definitely in the scouting report as well. He'll have probably a half dozen design quarterback run opportunities between reads and draws. But he's also a scrambler. They roll him out quite a bit. They like bootlegs, that sort of thing. He's a pretty skinny guy, and that makes him more of a sort of an elusive runner than like a lower the shoulder kind of Alex Orji runner. The one thing about him being skinny, he does have the Jaden Daniels thing where when he gets hit, he gets popped. Like if he gets hit, he goes flying and bounces off the turf like a basketball. It's a pretty funny sight, but he's not the easiest guy to sack because he can spin out of those things. He can juke in the open field. He's had 3 games, I believe, with over 50 or 60 rushing yards, sack adjusted. So that's definitely something Michigan's going to have to watch out for.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, one of the things I've been looking forward to this game for quite a while, and I've watched a lot of State this year, and I get a feeling like Michigan's defensive tackles are going to be able to get pressure, right? Like even if they go max pro, even if they're doubling those guys, they've given up pressure even with 2 guys on a good lineman, and this is leagues better than any of the linemen they've faced before. It's more like Michigan, like they lost contain a whole bunch against Illinois, who has like another quarterback who likes to get out of the pocket and run around, and that's really going to be like, can the ends crush it in too and just kind of make sure he doesn't escape? Because I don't think that 7-man protections are going to work really well against Michigan. I think you give them those extra opportunities, it's hard to find your one guy. Childs really is scariest to this offense, or scariest to this defense, I think, if he's getting out, if, Mason Graham tries to make a sack and then falls down and doesn't get to him and then he's loose, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we should mention in the running game, K'Ron Lynch-Adams is the new primary running back. Is a 2-time transfer. I believe he started at Rutgers, then he was at UMass. He was Don Brown's bell cow last year, and then he ends up at MSU. He's past Nate Carter on the depth chart and looks like a pretty solid player. It's just a matter of, will he have any rushing room? Will they be able to block for him? I'm pretty tepid on that. But look, they're coming off a great game. They crushed Iowa on the ground in really shocking fashion in that game. I watched it. I looked at some of the numbers. Don't really know why it happened. Iowa, yeah, obviously they don't have like a Mason Graham on their line, but their grades for the season in the defensive trenches have been pretty solid. And MSU's run blocking is overall, but in that game it was really good. So they're coming off a strong performance, but if Michigan can perform like Ohio State did against the run and some other teams MSU's faced, then I don't really anticipate it being a major threat for Michigan.
Right in the ads?
I mean, yeah, it's the dichotomy for Michigan is their starting line versus their backup line, right? So I do think that Michigan State is good enough to get some traction if they're able to stay on the field with Childs running or converting on third downs, and then those backups come in, and like I think they're good enough to start grinding the Michigan's second string line. I don't think they're going to do a whole lot against Mason Graham and company.
Yeah. Now, the last piece about the Iowa game is, how did they get Childs, to not? How did they get that game out of him? And one of the things I noticed is that they weren't passing as much in the red zone, to the point where Iowa actually, their run defense actually worked in the red zone a lot better when they could bring their safeties down a bit. is that maybe just they figure out the key is like, okay, just don't have him when things get compressed. Just let's not bother right now.
It's a possibility. They've had some issues in the red zone. Childs had a really bad fumble right at the goal line against Oregon early in that game that really set the tone and killed some momentum MSU had early on. So I think there may be a bit of conservatism in the red zone. And the other thing about them, and this is more special teams for the next segment, but is notable for the offense, is they really don't have to drive that far to get points. Jonathan Kim is a really, really good kicker. And so especially coming into this game where you're playing a Michigan team that has struggled offensively, struggled to put up points, there may be a bit of conservatism because field goals could win them this game, and they don't have to get very far to get in field goal range. So that's just definitely something to watch.
All right, that's the offense. I think we're going to take a break, and when we come back, Brian can lead this thing. Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
Gus is up next, but first, it's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of peakwm.com/mgoblog. My team of CFPs are managing over $350 million of client assets and have worked with hundreds of clients to and through retirement. Don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to your finances. Work with a team of CFPs. And now, it's time to check out the receiver at the top of the screen.
McCord looks, fires, intercepted!
Hi, this is Pete with Sharon's Heating and Air Conditioning. You've probably noticed that we are terrible about keeping our podcast advertisements up to date and topical to Michigan sports. Probably because we're so busy doing preventative maintenance for all of our many happy customers. We know no one is excited to call their HVAC contractor, and to make that a rare occurrence, you should regularly maintenance your system. Call us or text us to find out more about the benefits of our preventative maintenance plans, including savings on service calls and priority scheduling. Whatever the season, we want you to be comfortable for that next glorious Michigan victory.
I can't believe I'm doing this. If you find yourself in the penalty box, you want a Michigan man arguing your case, call criminal law attorney and former prosecutor Jonathan Paul tonight. It's 248-924-9458. Or visit his old website at michiganlawgrad.com.
Hey, fellow Michigan fans, this is Matt Demarest, Realtor and Lender. For a decade now, you've heard me on the podcast talk about mortgages, and I've helped hundreds of fellow Michigan fans in that capacity, including Brian and Seth. But many of you don't know I'm a real estate broker as well. I promise to make buying, selling, or financing a home simple and cost-effective anywhere in the state of Michigan. Whether you're upsizing, downsizing, buying a vacation home, or building a real estate investment portfolio, send me a text or give me a call. It's never too early to make a plan, and the call is always free. My number is 734-882-8194. Again, 734-882-8194. Or you can find me online at realtorandlender.com. That's realtorandlender.com. Whether you want to buy, sell, or finance a home, or even all three, I promise to provide the experience so many of you have come to expect over the years. And as always, thank you, and go blue. NMLS 1011726, Equal Housing Lender.
You don't know. Homicide of heroin, neckties for arrogance. All American tragedies embarrassing. It's so apparent y'all are here for the marriage.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.7. Hello, folks. I apologize for missing the first segment. Been a bit of a sleepy week in the household, or vice versa at the wrong times. Anyway, we now turn our attention to the Michigan State defense, which was rated in the portal after spring at defensive tackle and has been kind of hanging on by a thread for most of the year until a surprising performance. I guess how surprising can a good defensive performance be against Iowa?
Surprisingly, right.
Alex, how can Michigan run the ball against this team?
Potentially. I think they're going to have to do some things to be a little creative, because what MSU showed against Iowa is that if you're going to just run your base stuff between the tackles, they're going to tee off, and they send their linebackers downhill. Jordan Turner from Wisconsin in particular had a strong game in that department. And Iowa early in the game were kind of butting their head against the wall a little bit. They had 3 3-and-outs to start the game and 4 on the first 5 drives. 2 of those 3-and-outs end on 3rd and 1 and 3rd and 2 runs getting stuffed behind the line, and then they punt. And both of them were nothing crafty, just trying to, crush Michigan State up front, and Michigan State was just loading up and going after it. But if you're able to kind of remove that predictability a little bit, I think there's definitely a good chance, because the defensive tackles situation, they get rated in the portal, and you can tell. It's definitely not the greatest area of the defense. Daquan Dowse from Georgia Tech is one starter. He's not great. Alex Van Sumeren, brother of Ben, also not that great. The backups aren't very good. And you can watch some of these snaps, and defensive tackles get shoved out of the way, but linebackers are right there. And so you just got to do something to play with the linebackers a little bit, whether that's running to the outside, reverses, jet sweeps, things of that nature. Anytime you see Cal Halliday as the play side linebacker and he's going to have to make the tackle in space, I recommend trying that.
I didn't say it this time. I didn't say it. Alex said it.
Yeah, we haven't brought up the fact he doesn't wear gloves yet. That's a new record for us in podcasts involving Cal Halliday. I mean, I also noticed, Alex, you did not say the word pass as a way to mess with the linebackers, and that was Iowa's problem too. I'm not saying that we're going to be any better than Cade McNamara, but Cade had an awful game against Iowa and against Michigan State, and that was if you can't, like you said, if those linebackers can tee off.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta run play action against these guys. They didn't have enough play action snaps, but they have one where they throw to the tight end running down the seam. Linebackers are both biting so hard on the run, and it's wide open. I mean, that has to be the bread and butter for the approach going into this game. But definitely on the Cade front, this was a rough watch, and this definitely did not make me think that Cade would be a whole lot better than what we have here right now. It was pretty gruesome. There were a lot of passes that were pretty open that he just couldn't complete. They throwing them low, throwing them high, throwing them wide of the guy, and that contributed to Iowa's offense being pretty stagnant. But on the other hand, it gave us a decent picture into what the Michigan game dynamic could look like.
So I guess we do have to talk about Michigan throwing the ball. I am on the verge of completing the UFR for the Toledo game, which we'll talk about in a minute. Not Toledo, that's a different sport. But suffice it to say that Jack Tuttle did not grade out in a spectacular fashion. And he might start this week. He might not start this week. It's unclear. I assume that there will be a quarterback, and I assume that Michigan will try to throw the ball a few times. But what should they try to do against this defense, given their limitations?
Yeah, I mean, again, throw to the tight end on shorter stuff over the middle where you can have matchups with linebackers. Try to throw to the running back. I don't really know what else they can do beyond that. The corner situation is okay for MSU, but I just don't know how relevant that is because Michigan's got nothing from the wide receivers this year for the most part. Charles Brantley has, really taken some strides forward over his time at MSU. They got Ed Woods out of Arizona State, which was a decent pickup. Those guys are somewhat functional, which we're comparing this MSU defense to the Tucker defenses that couldn't stop the pass against anybody and put up some of the most humiliating box scores in college football history against Washington last year.
That's not fair.
The MSU one in 2021 where they were down 49-0 at halftime.
Okay, that one was pretty bad.
It was pretty bad. So the comparing it to that era, they've improved, but coverage is still not perfect. They do a lot of different coverages, which was a Rossi thing from Minnesota, and we watched him there. But the zone can have some holes in it, but definitely the linebackers are the matchup I'd look to exploit. Angelo Gross, their nickel, the same Angelo Gross from before, still not very good.
From before. From like, I think I remember him from like 2019. Like, how long has that guy been around?
He's been around a long time.
I love Alex is just being careful for the listeners in case they think there's another Angelo Gross that just popped up in the Michigan State secondary.
Like, oh man, that's funny. They had an Angelo Gross in like 2008. Like, that's just weird.
Yeah, so he's not very good, but he's only going to play when Michigan has 3 wide receivers, and that's just not necessarily something that they're going to do a ton of, and so it's more likely to play with Darius Snow as their sort of third linebacker in a 4-3 look. That's their base against Iowa, and I assume that's the base here. But the other thing to mention with the passing game, and this is helpful for Michigan because pass pro has been an issue, but Michigan State really has nothing pass rushing this season. They don't have really a single above average organic pass rusher. Their edges don't offer it. Their tackles don't offer it. Their blitzes were almost universally getting picked up against Iowa. PFF's team pass rush grade, I think, is 9th worst in the FBS this season for them. So Michigan should finally get some time to throw. It's just a matter of if their quarterback can complete passes, I guess.
I mean, it's weird. Like they had Brandon Jordan, who's one of the better defensive end coaches in football. He goes back to the NFL, but they have a couple guys that he recruited. Like Jalen Thompson was a top 50 guy, top 250 guy. Chris Bogle was like a former top 200 guy that was transferred from Florida. He's been in the program for years now. Like you'd think someone would be around from that whole thing, right? Like how do they not have anybody?
Well, they lost by Job to the portal, who was like their crown jewel. And I mean, Jalen Thompson, I think, is only a second-year player. So it's possible they could get more development down the line. The other guys at edge are mostly transfers, like Quindarius Dunnigan and Anthony Jones. So it's not all Brandon Jordan's guys. And again, they've been hit by the portal. It's a hodgepodge defense, but they've been decently competent so far. And that's what you can ask for after years of not being all that competent.
Would you try like what we did Penn State last year, like going heavy on these guys because they hate playing? I mean, they hate their defensive tackles, right? So what do you do with a team that just doesn't want to put out more defensive tackles?
I mean, it's a possibility. You just got to make sure you can get someone upfield to get blocks on the linebackers. It's not the worst strategy, but you definitely
you got to have the personnel to go heavy with.
Yeah.
Right. If Marlon Klein's not in this game, he only had 11 snaps last week, then you can put out 2 tight ends, but then you're going to, if Hinton's back, then I guess you can probably do it. But if Hinton's out, you want to bring in Evan Link.
Yeah.
Is that,
I mean, Link can move a guy if you just put him on a down block.
yeah, I mean, it just feels a little different than last year when it was like, okay, we'll bring in Trente Jones, and whoever they bring in to combat the idea of Trente Jones is going to get blocked by Trente Jones. It just feels a little bit more ambiguous this year.
Yeah. I don't know. It was a thought. I'm trying to think of any idea other than passing the ball. And
well, I mean, so one thing we'll get into in the next segment is like I actually am withdrawing most of my complaints about Kirk Campbell from last week. They had good ideas. They just couldn't execute them. And most of those ideas were not particularly hard to execute if you're a quarterback. So I do think that there is some possibility that they find a little something because they had guys open, they had opportunities to make plays, and those plays just weren't made. And if this at this point, if literally everybody's turning the ball over, you might as well go back to Davis Warren because like if the rationale was like we can't turn the ball over as much with Davis and we got to get rid of Davis Warren. Well, now everybody's doing it. So he's been the guy who's flashed the most ability to throw a ball to someone downfield. You might see Michigan go back to that and get a little traction and then throw an interception. But, what are you going to do?
One thing
You
that
gotta
is
play the game.
one thing I think should be also mentioned, MSU's had a little bit of problem with the problem with the explosive run in the last few weeks. They've given up at least one 35-plus yard run in each of their last 4 games, including a 75-yarder for Caleb Johnson last week that really skewed some of the total stats. I can't really pin down why those have happened each week, but something to keep an eye on. And maybe there's an opportunity for another Kalel Mullings beast quake kind of run.
Yeah, I mean, that was one problem that Michigan had against Illinois is they actually had a number of long drives, but they didn't end in points because of either turnovers or blocked short field goal, and they didn't have any explosives on those plays. And that's been like, if they were able to mix in some explosives with this offense, I think they would improve considerably because they are able to grind out first downs against kind of mid defenses. And it looks like this is going to be another mid defense. But anytime you have to go 15 plays to do anything, you're probably going to screw up along the way. And with Michigan, you're definitely going to screw up. So explosives are going to be important. Surprise.
Yeah. I mean, this is our last opportunity after 4 years of, hey, can we get, Donovan Edwards matched on Cal Halliday? And last year, it was like they threatened it. I mean, they last year was almost more brilliant because they would threaten it and then they would hit him with Colston Loveland, and he gets matched up one time with Tyler Morris, and you're like, ha ha. So
I mean, there was that play 2 years ago where they got him matched up on Jacoby Windman. So I feel like I've seen it. Like I feel like I got that box checked.
Okay.
Because it was like, this guy is a defensive end, a literal defensive end, and this is a guy like who's kind of a defensive end playing linebacker. It feels pretty similar. All right. Well, hopefully Michigan can stave off the defeat at the hands of Sparty in year 1 under Sharon Moore, which would it make the rest of the season less annoying moderately. All right, we're going to take a break, come back, and discuss what we saw in our charting.
Mullings dragging Trojans, broke free. Mullings dragging Trojans, dragging Trojans.
It's Nick Hopwood, CFP and founder of Peak Wealth Management. Learn how to retire with peak confidence at peakwm.com/mgoblog. A lot of people don't realize we have a special arrangement with the University 401, 403, 457 retirement plan. If you're a university employee or even a former university employee, you can add us as your advisor to your account. And my bet is that we can help you optimize your situation, especially when it comes to taking advantage of the mega backdoor Roth option with the 457. If you're highly compensated, I can show you a way to contribute over $60,000 per year to the university plan.
Mullings dragging Trojans, broke free. Mullings in the clear. It's a foot race. He'll get tracked down, but he comes up with the biggest play of the day.
Jake Butt here, guys, live down from the National Championship Convention Center down in Houston, and we got some big-time news for you guys, Michigan faithful. We need your help to keep our team. Last year, Champion Circle launched the One More Year Fund to support key players coming back, like Blake Corum, Trevor Keegan, and Zach Sinner, who elected to return to Michigan for one more year. Now we're launching the Those Who Stay NIL campaign. Our rivals are coming after many of our key players, trying to induce them to leave Michigan. It's time for the Michigan family to show our players how much we appreciate them and want them back in the maize and blue. To keep the momentum going, head over to thosewhostay.uofm.com. Again, that is thosewhostay.uofm.com to support. Go Blue.
Winewood Organics is Ann Arbor's only cannabis microbusiness. It's a place where plants are grown in living soil, where nearly every product is made, mixed, trimmed, and packed by hand, where first-time customers save 25% on everything from old-school hash to live resin carts. You can find them just west of downtown or at winewoodorganics.com. Winewood Organics, a place where the weed is better. Need help with insurance? Well, longtime MGoBlog supporter Owen Rosen is back at his new insurance brokerage, Royal Oath Insurance Group. Owen might not be the knowledge, but he and his team have the life, business, car, and home insurance knowledge you need. Based in Michigan, but they can also help in other states too, you can call or text Owen today at 586-229-1026 or visit Royal Oath, that's OATH, insurance.com.
Maize and Blue Nation, it's Tom Brady. I founded Autograph with one mission in mind: change the fan experience for the better. That's why I'm excited to announce the official launch of the Autograph app, the app that gives die-hard Wolverine fans like you a one-stop shop for your Michigan fandom. Autograph has all the best Michigan content in one place and rewards you for all the things you're already doing as a fan, like listening to this podcast. It's time to feed your fandom with the Autograph app. Let's go and go blue.
It's safe to say today I will admit I learned my lesson. Don't care how bad the situation is, won't switch directions. Above all things I first will seek the path that leads to heaven. Until you lay your burdens down, you can't receive your blessing. Revelation, carry my intent through my communication. Bear my stress and the graves I did through the evolution of the
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.7. Now is the time on Sprockets where we talk about what we learned in the charting. My UFR will go up shortly. Apologies for the delay. But I actually okay.
You're what? You what?
Well,
I
actually found some things to talk about, I guess is the way I would phrase it. Obviously,
yeah.
The whole beginning of it is basically, what is the point of this? The quarterback situation is abominable, which is true.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Tuttle checked in with a minus 16. Which may have been generous, and there were just a number of plays on which they seem bad live, and then I started reviewing them, and I'm like, oh god, they're so much worse than I thought. The overturned interception, I think, was the worst one, because that hits the guy in the face mask, and he's 6 yards short of Tyler Morris, and also he's like 4 or 5 yards away laterally from where he should be if he's going to intercept a pass that's actually to Tyler Morris. Like, that throw was probably 10 yards off.
That guy's covering grass. Nowhere near.
Yes. He's covering grass. If Tuttle throws it to Tyler Morris, he's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like, maybe he waves his arm at a ball that he can't get to. So it's not even a bad read. It's not a bad read. It's just one of the worst throws I've ever seen. And it's like, what are you going to do with that? I don't know. But so there were a couple of things that I thought were takeaways. One is that Andrew Gentry can play against Illinois. So I had him as like a plus 8.5. He did have 4 pass pro minuses, one of them on a play action pass where he kind of lunged at a guy, and that's more understandable to me than when you're in an actual true pass set and you just get whooped. That did not happen to him, and he was consistent. He was consistently moving guys. I think he should be the starter going forward. I kind of think he should have been the starter from the beginning of the season.
Well, I mean, are we happy about this, or are we like, what percentage are we happy and what percentage are we like, what in the world?
Yeah, I mean, this is all a good news, bad news situation, no matter how he played.
Right.
Because if he doesn't play well, the bad news is you don't have a right tackle. If he does play well, the bad news is like, what the hell?
This would be like,
what are we doing?
It'd be like if they start Jaden Denegal this week and he's like, Wilton Speight.
Yeah, he's
level.
good. Yeah. Yeah, that is the dichotomy, but I guess I'd rather have a functional right tackle. And while Andrew Gentry has not proven that, he seems a lot closer than the competition. Percy got another start at left tackle. He was okay. Like, he gave up a couple of pressures that were -1 pressures, not -2 pressures. I think he was dead even on the ground, which is not good. You want a 2-to-1 positive to negative ratio in my charting. And I can see why you would go with someone with more upside there, but Gentry has multiple years of eligibility left. He was moving guys consistently. That's the one that really kind of rankles. And, I think if they get Miles Hinton back and they stick with Gentry at right tackle, you could see this line become, a pretty good run blocking line, because, Preeb has, I guess, rounded into like a B+ player. He's very consistent. He's not going to, obliterate a guy off the line of scrimmage, but he's a good player. Like, he had some early season hiccups, but for the last 3 or 4 games I've charted, he's been a upper echelon Big Ten lineman. So if you plug a couple of holes, you might be in business. Now, I didn't think Crippen was a big upgrade on Jadis. Like, he was okay, but he gave up a sack on a 3-man rush that was pretty ugly. Had a couple other issues, had some positive moments, but didn't seem like a game changer. So that one that's the good news, bad news again. It's like, well, their decision with Giudice was reasonable, but that means that there's no cavalry coming at the center position.
It's
So, I
like
mean,
we can't trust anything that these people say anymore, though. Like, because this is a guy you talk about Crippen. One of the reasons we were so high on him is they're like, oh, he's in a dead heat with Nugent. And
yeah,
like we saw Nugent play last year. He wasn't he wasn't Olu, but even if anybody who was in competition with him performed the way that we've been seeing center perform this year, there's just no way. And it's like I don't know what to believe anytime any of these guys say anything now because they went with Link in front of. I'm starting to get very concerned, and I guess Percy too. Like he hasn't. The way you talk about him is the way I talked about him after his Rutgers start when he was a redshirt freshman. And it's like, where's the development on the offensive line that we were promised? And I guess Al Hadi is like an even another case example of that.
well, I mean, just because one guy doesn't develop doesn't mean that you're not developing guys on the offensive line. It's possible that Percy just hit his ceiling. Like I would point to Miles Hinton as an example of a guy who's really improved drastically since arriving at Michigan.
Okay.
Like, when he was healthy, he was tracking towards being a draft pick, and he came to Michigan, he was just falling over all the time. So Miles Hinton had upside to be Miles Hinton. I think Jeff Percy is just that guy.
Okay.
He's just a guy. And I think Gentry has more upside than that. And I don't know what the decision process was that led to Link starting, but it's clear the staff has made a lot of mistakes. And, Alex has been issuing some sort of doomer tweets about like, why would you think that, like, what gives you confidence that this team will be a better coach next year? And I'm like, well, coaches aren't static things, right? Like Jim Harbaugh was improving as a coach deep into his Michigan career, which was 20 years into his head coaching career. And like, do you want to go hire Les Miles tomorrow? No, you don't. So I kind of feel like I want to see them learn from mistakes that they made this offseason, go heavy in the portal, come back next year and see what happens. And this is always a risk when you hire a guy for the first time. Like he's a first-time head coach, and guys like Ryan Day, they were born on third base and they inherited third base. Mm-hmm. You can say that Sharon Moore was born on third base, but he sure as shit didn't inherit third base. Like, right? Yeah. He didn't inherit a quarterback at all. So any mistakes that he was making are magnified. And that goes back to what I want to say about Kirk Campbell, is that I thought Kirk Campbell actually had a good game plan. I thought I still wasn't happy about the first play, which I thought was optimistic in a foolhardy way. But they had a two-back package with Mullings and Edwards that made sense and got some things if their quarterback would have executed. They had a number of inventive screens that they didn't quite execute. They had an RPO to Max Bredesen, which I desperately wanted to have happen. That was a good play call and just got, I think, deflected barely by a defensive end, and it went into the turf. Either that or Tuttle just turfed it. They mixed up some of their run calls with some down G stuff that played off the opposition's tendency to play Michigan to spill power. They had play action that looked like stuff that they ran that wasn't just that fake split zone, roll out into the flat stuff that everybody has scouted and won. They came out plus, 5 or 6 in my RPS charting. And you have to consider the context, right? It's relatively easy to have a nice RPS when you've got, JJ McCarthy strolling out there.
Right.
And it's a lot harder when you have Jack Tuttle shutting out there. So, we had a conversation about who's firing who, and Kirk Campbell was the main focus on our podcast this weekend. And after reviewing this tape, I thought they did a good job, but you can't tell because they don't have the talent.
And yeah, I mean, like I got into the 2 RB package for next Sharpies this week, and very similar story there, where it works, and then like they go to run play action off of it, and they can't complete the play action, right? Like it's just you got what you wanted. You got Colson Loveland running down the middle open with the free safety bailing to try to help the side because of what you got off the first play, but then it's just like it doesn't work because they can't throw it. I don't know if I saw what are the other ideas you mentioned the down G thing. Are these ideas things that like they came out with just to beat Illinois, or is this stuffing that like do we have a package now that works? Do we have a thing that we major in?
Well, what it felt like is it felt closer to what Michigan was able to do the last few years with the ground game, where they're able to anticipate, all right, so we're going to run a counter here, and we're going to run it a couple of times, and we're seeing what the opposition is doing, and we're going to give them something that, kind of superficially looks like it and has a tweak to it so that what they're doing is wrong. And it wasn't nearly as multifaceted as last year, right? It wasn't nearly as multifaceted as like the pinnacle of Jim Harbaugh's Michigan coaching career. But the ideas were good. And when they slipped Loveland into the flat this time, they had him release like it was power. And they pulled a guard, and the linebacker level self-deleted. And that's something you're not seeing on those split zone fake waggle things. And he was wide open for a chunk play. The next one was a wide delay release where he's pass blocking, and they changed it up so that he wasn't going across the middle of the field where the linebackers were hanging out, but he was going down the side of the field where the cornerback had been run off. And there were other incidences where they had open guys and Tuttle either couldn't get it to him or didn't even run the play. So there was the sack that got charged to, I think that might have been the sack that Pro Football Focus charged to Gentry. But to me, you've got Colson Loveland sort of flaring out and then blocking a defensive end inside, and you have a flood as your main pattern, which a flood is when you got three guys on like one edge of the field or if we're getting into the weeds. So that's a rollout. Like that's 100% a rollout. And you know what Jack Tuttle didn't do?
Roll out?
Yes. So it's like,
yeah.
How and Samaj Morgan is wide open on that play. He's wide open for a first down and a catch and run that could be a lot more. And that just felt like a lot of what I was seeing as I was seeing good ideas that fit into a hole. And it was an encouraging offensive game plan, hamstrung by the fact that they got an absolutely garbage performance from the quarterback. So I'm a little bit more optimistic about Campbell this week. And it's possible that it felt like this because he had Jack Tuttle, and, Tuttle flashed a couple of things 2 weeks ago, and he thinks, okay, we're going to be able to run something approximating the offense that I'm comfortable with. And that was incorrect. But
no, well,
if we assume that next year they have a functional quarterback, I think Kirk Campbell might seem a lot smarter than he seems right now.
Okay, I'm willing to buy it. The thing is, a lot of the ideas that I saw, and maybe are like a two-back set, or a weird motion with Samaj Morgan. These are things that we were talking about in preseason. Is something that like, okay, this is what we right.
Okay. But it's easy to be a blogger,
Yeah. Okay.
Like I don't want to like. So I am frustrated that they came out with a good and interesting two-back package that was an offset ace with a lot of motion from Edwards that got Loveland wide open for a chunk play that Tuttle didn't throw, had a counter off of it. They had a package that felt like sort of that JJ package when he was a freshman.
Yeah.
Like it's not the base offense, but they worked on something. They showed us something. It looked like they developed something. And yeah, it sucks that it took 7 games to get something that looked like they had thought about this and they wanted to do it. Agreed.
Okay.
And I'm still frustrated by everything that went on this offseason. But we have to look at the situation that we have now and how we improve from here. And this game and this game plan made me think that Kirk Campbell could be part of that solution. Now, I'm not saying that I know that for a fact, but I don't think that it was nearly as bad as I thought on Sunday, which is why we do these things.
Yeah.
All right, we haven't talked about the defense. Why don't we spent way too much time on the
well, because no one
the
wants to know.
offense.
The defense was fine.
Yeah, it
I mean, the
was.
defense, like, if you put this defense against an Iowa offense that can punt the ball and doesn't turn it over, they win 5-3. It's like they gave up 21 points because they're starting on the 39, the 40, the 45, the 49, their own 38, and their own 16, right? The other thing is that Illinois really game planned for this one. You know, we go through this stuff every week, and I'd actually watch a lot more Illinois than other teams for some reason. And it was like, there was a lot more. There were a lot more formations. There were a lot more ideas, right? Like they're pulling out a down G. I don't think we've ever seen them run that before. They have a reverse. They have a fake punt, right? Like they just have so much stuff. They went go-go. I don't think we've ever seen him do that before with like covered receivers. They had a diamond formation that looked like Lloyd Carr's transcontinental, right? Like there was just so much stuff that was thrown at them, and their eye discipline was pretty good. You know, you see Jason Barham blew up that reverse. They got a false start on a play where their offensive lineman was lined up outside, and that was supposed to be a trick play that was going to get their tight end open. And Michigan had two guys on the tight end. They had guys pointing at him and then ready to cover him. And so, like, if they hadn't had a false start, the read that was supposed to be open was there. So I think that 2 weeks were used productively. I think that Wink Martindale looked at what his guys can do and can't do. The major thing that happened in this game is they were bringing their cornerbacks down a lot more. They played a lot more press. Now, the downside of that is Amir Hall got beat a couple times, but the upside is Jair Hill can just kind of go and play football. And when that guy is just allowed to go and play football, he's got that talent. So he's less likely to flip out and give up a bunch of room underneath when he's running with the receiver. You can feel where the receiver is. It's just an athletic competition at that point, and he's good at that. So I think that Wink went away from some of the things that he's done earlier, and then when we came back to the Wink Martindale stuff, it was way more effective. And it was more effective because it worked in the context of what they're doing, similar to what you said with the offense, right? It was just it made more sense than just I want to look cool and I want to do things. So, Wink Martindale's in a little different spot than Kirk Campbell because he's got a 3-year contract that's a lot of money, so it'd be really expensive to lose him. And I've been trying to hedge with him because, like, he's transferring from the NFL and he's not like a young guy, so it's, a little harder to kind of – and this is not what he was promised, right? He was told he was going to have Rod Moore to lean on, and instead he's, got Zeke Berry out there. So I think he's adapting. He's certainly not doing what he wants to do. He's still got RPS in this game, but I thought it was a Bielema game, and Michigan was reacting for the most part, and they reacted pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't chart every play, but I don't recall any issues that I was having with the defense where I was just like, come on, Wink.
Yeah.
Which is, again, it's easy to be a blogger. It's tough to be a football coach, but the kind of things where it's just like, it feels like he's out over his skis and he's doing something wacky and his players aren't NFL players. So the level of execution he expects is not likely. I didn't feel like a whole lot of that was going on. I thought that was a positive. Any players that pop out, hopefully with eligibility next year?
Well, Jason Barham technically has eligibility next year. There was a rough game for Ernest Hausman, which may be a good news for next year because I don't know if he's an NFL guy yet. He was kind of like Junior Colson if he could tackle is kind of my comp for him right now, if he couldn't tackle like he could, right? Like he had a horrible whiff where they had a blitz lined up for him and he falls down. But like they're the kind of things where like I have to give him a big minus for that, and okay, you can clean that thing up. It's kind of hard to like get a read on him because he was playing safety, but Mason Curtis, like the 6'5" freshman, like the fact that he's in there at all is good. And then there's a play where they run China, which is, we're getting to the weeds again, but a play that is, as long as you read it right, a guy should be coming open. It takes a really good, a really well organized coverage in order to cover that, because they're having two guys cross in front of you. You also have a guy run to the corner. Michigan has the right coverage on, but the coverage relies on a lot of movement and a lot of changing by Mason Curtis. And there's that true freshman. It's like, okay, that's the perfect call to pick on that guy because someone's going to come open. And he plays it perfectly. I mean, it's not like the most complicated thing in the world, but it's something that we've seen other safeties screw up. It's something we've seen Makari Page screw up this year. And Mason Curtis just runs it. And for most of the game, he was in there for 22 snaps. I think for about 18 of them, he was +0, -0. And I'm like, this is going to be the greatest safety debut of all time. And then he picks up like a half point for getting a good tackle. And I had to give him a point for that one because like it added to the coverage. So maybe he's a guy that, we can look for in the future. And I guess the young defensive tackles, we saw a lot more Trey Pierce in this game. He and Ikawuna both bid on a midline. That was, something they hadn't practiced. But that's like, other than that, Pierce got blown out one time by a double, but, that happens to Graham too. And then he had some pretty good get-off. Like the things that you want to see of him if he was not taking Rashawn Benny's place. If he was like in a, from what we want of him right now, we're seeing the right things. Like he's on track to be a dude next year, or at least like a Rashawn Benny level dude next year. And Ikawuna the same thing. He doesn't really get moved by doubles. He has those plays where he can just like hop around a guy sometimes. You can see that they've been playing with Mason Graham because they keep on trying to do things that Mason Graham does. It doesn't always work, but it's like, okay, I like that you're trying. So yeah, those guys are doing well. The defensive ends, Stewart's amazing as always. Cameron Brandt was not. I'm a little concerned if and someone else doesn't come along next year to be to kind of challenge him, because he's not big enough to really kind of stand up to. He got doubled by two tight ends in this game and just got completely blown off the ball, and he doesn't have that. At best he's gonna be a Mike Morris level pass rusher, right? Like a guy who just bull rushes. So when he tries to do more, he's going around guys and going deep, and that was the last issue in this game. And if you want to pick a thing to be mad at Wink about, right? If you're looking to be mad at Wink, his 2-minute drill defense is not good. And I don't know if this is something that anyone else has picked up on or been talking about, but I ran the stats just to kind of look at like what's going on with and he's giving up a quarter of a point per play versus like they were in the negatives, and they should be in the negatives. Even in 2020, it was in the negatives. So I'm trying to figure out why, and I'm watching these plays, and it's like, well, they're playing deep cover. They're playing deep man every play, and they're running the defensive ends way upfield. One time, they actually, TJ Guy backtracks and gets the quarterback down after 5 yards. And it's like, maybe that's what we're trying to do. Is this like an NFL approach where he doesn't realize that, the clock stops if they get a first down? So that's another thing to keep an eye on, is the 2-minute drill defense has been bad all year. And if there's a way to identify what's wrong with it, it's just they're playing off man and trying to bleed them down the field at 15, 16 yards at a time, and you can't do that in college.
Yep. All right, let's take a break, come back, and shift gears to basketball. It's the time of year where cracks in your defense get exposed. Good thing to fix is a phone call away. Community Pest Solutions is a lockdown defender for homes and businesses. If you're hearing noises in your walls or attic or dealing with bug problems, it's time to call Community. To schedule an inspection, just Google Community Pest Solutions or hit up their website at pestfreemi.com.
Since 2001, Underground Printing has been the Ann Arbor original. Starting from a West Quad dorm room and growing into the go-to source for custom apparel and Michigan gear. Whether you're gearing up for game day or creating custom design for your team or business, Underground Printing has you covered. With 3 convenience stores right on campus, getting your hands on high-quality Wolverine gear has never been easier. Visit Underground Printing today, in-store or online at shop.undergroundshirts.com, where Michigan pride meets top-notch service.
The only thing we can be sure of about the future is that it will be absolutely fantastic. I'm thinking of the incredible breakthrough made possible by developments in communications.
Arthur C. Clarke's 1964 vision is now reality with SignalWire, a cloud platform that enables developers to build the applications that will reshape the future of communications.
These things will make possible a world in which we can be in instant contact with each other wherever we may be.
You can add cutting-edge, real-time video and audio to any product, website, or application with APIs and SDKs for developers of all skill sets. SignalWire is optimized for high-quality and low-latency communication functionality for video, voice, and text messaging capabilities.
Almost any skill could be made independent of distance. Men will no longer commute. They will communicate.
See for yourself at signalwire.com. Use code 2021 and receive $25 in developer credit. Go to signalwire.com.
SignalWire Communications OGs, original geeks of programmable communication.
In southeastern Michigan, the yearly cost for a nursing home averages
approximately $100,000.
It doesn't have to, though. Reed McCarthy founded Ann Arbor Elder Law after handling a tricky situation for his own family. Years of experience later, his boutique firm works with clients across southeast Michigan, dealing with Medicaid planning, long-term care, and tax, disability, and family law, not to mention family dynamics. If you have a family member who may need that level of care, or if you're ready to start your own estate plan, Reed can give you a plan for the future. Visit AnnArborElderLaw.com or call 734-945-9693. That's 734-945-9693.
Frustrated with your current e-commerce agency? Then it's time to meet Human Element, a digital marketing and web development agency with 20 years of experience building B2B and B2C websites. See us as an extension of your team, accessible, responsive, and strategic. We work with you to understand your goals so that we can build something that drives revenue and delights your customers. So if you're looking for an agency that acts as a true partner in your e-commerce business, visit human-element.com/partner. We can't wait to work with you.
The poor one. The rich one. The Lord wants money. Get the cash, get the cash, get the cash.
Welcome back to MGoRadio 10.7. Now is the time on Sprockets when we talk about basketball. We talked about this a little bit on TKA, but we have not actually addressed Michigan's exhibition against Oakland on a flagship podcast. I guess this is a flagship podcast. And we are going to do that now. As we mentioned on Thursday, encouraging performance against a tricky zone where Michigan didn't take very many bad shots at all. And for early in the season, that's a really nice thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we were talking about on WTKA is the ball didn't stick. And, like, we talk about this, and then you see it, right? It's different when you can actually see these guys all on the court at the same time. And you're like, how is it going to look when we have all these guys who are point guards on their teams last year? Well, what it looks like is that everybody's a point guard, and everybody knows what to do with the ball. So you can have Reuben Jones bring the ball up and run a set, and that set, can involve Trey Donaldson being the guy who, ends up being the justice shooter in the end. And then it goes to Danny Wolf, and he knows where to throw the ball to. It's like everybody knows what to do with the ball, and it's, it's not beautiful in the beeline way where there's just a system and there's just no way to beat it. Everywhere there's always a place to go with the ball was like the beeline system. It just felt a lot more open and flowing. I don't know. Maybe this is.
Well, I think part of it is just the fact that we're going from a team that had literally one guy who could pass the ball and one guy who could handle the ball.
Right.
He was suspended for a big chunk of the season to, three guys who were point guards for their teams last year, and Danny Wolf, who's going to be one of the most skilled bigs in America. Mm-hmm. So there was a passing play. I think it was Wolf driving inside and dumping it off to Cheddar for a bucket, and I was like, that's sexy. So it just felt like a completely different basketball team, because it is literally a completely different basketball team. It is formed out of whole cloth. But often what you see from a lot of these teams that rely heavily on transfers is that early in the season, they look disjointed, they look disorganized, they look like they don't really know what they're doing. Kentucky under Calipari is a great example of how these teams often feel. And that is not the case with this team. And I don't 3-0 last year. They beat St. John's. We don't want to get too far out over our skis, but we are reacting to the information in front of our pupils. And it didn't feel like a team comprised of transfers, right? It felt like a team that had played together a bit. And I was surprised by that, honestly.
I mean, when we sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that was my biggest thing about this game is they looked organized. They looked like a team with some chemistry. Rotations looked good. Like it just overall seemed a lot more cohesive than I was expecting. I mean, they did turn it over 14 times, but it wasn't like a ton of really bad throwing it out of bounds. Like we don't know exactly what's going on sort of thing. And it just looked like a team that's prepared and at a good place at this point in the season, which I think is fairly impressive, but need to see more evidence of that.
Yeah, and those turnovers, I mean, I think that got I don't want to focus too much on those because a lot of them were kind of in the, we're already blowing these guys out by 20, let's try some stuff kind of part of the game. And when they, they get into the game, and you brought up St. John's last year because St. John's is another team that was just full of transfers. And what did we come out of that game with? We think, Nakamo can play. That was kind of our feel, right? Like, we have some good dudes. It wasn't like, we got a team. And that was St. John's problem last year is they didn't have, they weren't used to playing with each other because they were a team of transfers. This team looks like they were built with an idea in mind. We need a certain thing at the 2. We got Roddy Gale. We need a certain kind of guy to play the 3. We got Reuben Jones. And I'm not pegging them in those holes because that's another thing about this team is they can do so many different things. Reuben Jones looked taller than I thought he was going to look. Will Cheddar looked more agile than I remember him looking. Sam Walters is just like really long, so like he's not, a defensive liability. I didn't think he was just a shooter. Like he's somebody that can maybe play, give you some good minutes at the 4 this year. So I was encouraged by pretty much everybody who got on the court.
The one thing that I don't want to draw any conclusions about is who is not a defensive liability after one game against Oakland.
That's fair.
Right?
That's fair,
like,
yeah.
Walters can shoot. Michigan can pass. I like the organization of the offense. I think they're going to be a good offense, but jury is still out about defense at the 4 and 5.
Yeah.
I think. I want to go back to the turnovers for a little bit because I don't think that this is ever going to be a team that hits like the Beeline level of turnover avoidance. Because at Florida Atlantic, Dusty May was there for 6 years. His best year was the Final Four year where they finished 85th. And then the year after that, they were 113th. The 2 years before that, they were in the 250s. And so what I think that says is that they are going to look for the best shots they can get. And they're going to use multiple ball handlers. So it's not going to be one guy who has like a rock bottom turnover rate for a guy with the ball in his hands that much. And you're going to be spreading the ball out. So you're going to have the ball in the hands of guys who are more turnover prone because you just don't have 4 of those guys on any one team. But the trade-off for that is the stuff we saw in Synergy when we started looking at Dusty May's profile, where it's like, yeah, they're 99th percentile in percentage of shots attempted that are unguarded catch and shoot jumpers. Right. So that's the trade-off they're making. Michigan's going to turn the ball over more than they did under John Beeline. But what they're hoping to make up for that there is they're hoping that effective field goal percentage makes up for that. And also their free throw rate. Because, Michigan has never had a good free throw rate. The Howard era, Beeline era, that was another commonality between those two teams. And, May's teams have not historically had that until their last year, and I think that's Janelle Davis. And what they got in Roddy Gale is they got a guy who's going to get to the line, and they have guys who are going to pressure you downhill. And so I think turnover rate's going to be fine. It's not going to be great. It's not going to be bad. But if you're looking for Michigan's offense to be a top 20, maybe even a top 10 outfit, it's effective field goal percentage, free throw rate.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, we don't want to talk about too much defense against Oakland. Oakland, the one thing that they do have are pretty tall guards. Who was the one guy that I liked? Jason Woodridge It's kind of like their shooter, this guy he got from Cleveland State, who looked like the one player on that team.
Well, he scored,
but he was jacking up from like.
Yeah, he took a lot of volume to do it.
Yeah, exactly, and that was the only thing they got. Well, the way that Greg Comfey makes his teams is he likes to have big guards. I mean, the guy's been coaching around here for 40 years. Everyone in Michigan has an opinion on him. But one of the things is he has big guards, and he wants those guys to be able to shoot over you. What's the one thing that has been happening to Michigan guards, under Beeline, it goes way back. We had short guards, and they could just shoot over those guys. And there wasn't a single time where one of those guys went to go do his pull-up thing, and the guard that was on him from Michigan was not big enough to take him, right? And it wasn't just a Reuben Jones thing. Like, they have, Roddy Gale's a big, long guy, right? Trey Donaldson looks like a linebacker. It looks like a safety. And he's, these guys are 6'3", 6'4", 6'5". That's something that you used to be able to always hit Michigan with, and it was like you said, Oakland can't always tell, but I think that's real.
Yeah, I mean, it's it did feel like they put effort into being defensively aggressive on the perimeter in a way that I didn't feel from early Beeline teams. So, and they have the athleticism and the size to do it as well. So even if they have some issues in the front court, which I think they probably will, it's you're able to cover some of those things up. If you have, if other teams find it difficult to get into their sets, which I think Michigan is going to put an emphasis on. I just, think about that Franz Wagner, Isaiah Livers team. Now, Michigan doesn't have a 6'7" guy and a 6'10" guy as their perimeter defenders, but Reuben Jones is an established elite perimeter defender, and I think Namari Burnett can get there, and Roddy Gale is very good too. So that issue you had the last few years where Michigan was forcing opponents into reasonably good shots for the defense, but they were just getting canned at a high rate because Michigan didn't have the size to contest. I think that'll be less of a problem next year.
Yeah.
That'll be less of a problem last year.
Yeah.
That's something that people say. So Toledo tonight, they returned most of a team that was like 100th, 130th in KenPom. They're projected in around 180th on both KenPom and Porvik. So step up from Oakland, but not a team that is as good as the Toledo teams from last couple of years. Should be an interesting game.
Yeah, I'm going to watch Wolf. I'm going to want to see what happens with him at the 4 because this is like kind of a small ball team, so maybe it's going to be a little bit different look, and we're going to see Michigan play different groups. All right.
Boris is a mayor and a land surveyor with plans of his own. He hates Aruska, he hates a vodka bandit from his home. He hates Aruska, vodka. He never drank a single drop. He hates Aruska, vodka. There's poison he swears to stop. He's singing la da 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 da. Then one day Boris was visited by demons in his head, and they said, bring me Ruski vodka or your son may soon be dead. So he went to the